Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. As always, my name is Cory, and this is a continuation of my top 50 favorite board games of all time. On today's list, I am running through games 30 up to 21. Let's get started. Okay, and my game number 30 was number 48 last year. It is my first and only game by the designer Vita Lacerda. I do have many of his other games on my shelf, but they have yet to be played, sadly, because I really do enjoy this one. Like I said, my number 30, number 48 last year, so it has been climbing a lot, and it is a complicated-ish worker placement style game called Kanban. I have the driver's edition. Kanban EV, I hear, is just completely beautiful. It's the new version of the game, but I don't own that one. But I own the Stronghold Games edition, the driver's edition of the game, and it's just a lot of fun. In Kanban, you are running an automobile factory, getting everything from the parts to testing the vehicle to getting different vehicle plans and trying to get the most amount of victory points you can while running your automobile factory. It sounds like a dry theme, but it's a unique one. The cool, unique thing with this one is that your boss, Sandra, is actually walking around the warehouse floor, making sure that each of the departments is being run in a good way. And if you are not running any one of the departments optimally, then you can get negative victory points for that. If you're playing with the mean boss version, there is a nice boss version of the game as well, and you can decide that before you start playing the game. But I do like playing with the mean boss side of things because it just adds a little bit more tension to what you're doing, and people have to pay more attention to the actions that they're taking. It's not as free form, it's a little tighter, more punishing, and makes for a little bit more complicated strategy, and that's what I really appreciate in this one. My alternative pick for this game is another worker placement game where you have very minimal workers to really do actions with, just like in Kanban, and this is Dinosaur Island. Completely different theme, but Dinosaur Island does feel really tight with its worker placement and the different actions you can do with your workers. You are running your own dinosaur theme park, trying to not get your attendees chomped by dinosaurs, and also running a theme park to make it as fun as possible, getting points in those various ways. You are collecting DNA samples and using those to create more dinosaurs to put into your park, and you are putting up these different huts and food stands and drink stands and running your own theme park around the whole dinosaur theme. I do like Dinosaur Island a little bit better than Dinosaur World. It just feels, again, like a little bit more of a tighter game strategy-wise, which is the main reason why I like Kanban so much. Both games are similar in their own unique way. So I think if you do like one, you will probably like the other. But for this time, my pick is Kanban. Okay, and my number 29 was number 13 last year, so dropping quite a bit, and there's just so many great games out there that it's hard for any one game to remain in a position for a long period of time. It's a blessing and also a curse with today's hobby and standard of game that there are just so many great titles coming out every year that even if a game were great last year, it might get bumped out by a game that might be just a little bit better, and every game is threatened by that each year. But anyway, this game is Ginkopolis. Ginkopolis is a very unique one, and we'll get into this in a second with my alternative pick for Ginkopolis. There is not too many other games like it. In Ginkopolis, you are drafting cards to your hand and using the cards for different actions, but the actions revolve around tile placement and really have an area presentation that you are building out collectively as a group on the main board, but you are all individually trying to score the most points possible to win. There's also a 3D element to this game, which I really enjoy, where when you are placing out tiles, you not only have the opportunity to spread the tiles out further, but you can also build them on top of one another in a 3D aspect. And depending on the height of the stack you're building on, or how far out the area is, it will score you different amounts of victory points at the end of the game for various scoring cards that you can draft and collect throughout the game, and also the level of tile that you're building. You're also sending these different colored cylinders in your player color out to try to take control of these different areas on the map as well, that, like I said, you and your opponents are collectively building and really paying attention to. So you are trying to take control of different areas, all in the meanwhile building out the board and trying to do that better than your opponents, but things are ever changing and ever shifting and makes for a very unique, complicated, very heavy strategy style game, but one that I really enjoy. So for my alternative pick on this, it is First Class All Aboard the Orient Express. And this is more of the card-based version game of Ultimate Railroads, or Russian Railroads, German Railroads, American Railroads, all the different expansions to that. I have the Ultimate Railroads edition, which is the newer box version that has Russian Railroads with all of the expansions just built into the box in one big Ultimate edition. So that is the version I've got. But like I said, First Class is the card version of Russian Railroads. Where First Class really feels like a Ginkopolis is the interaction between you and your opponents with the main part of the board. In First Class, you are trying to build out your train systems and railroads better than any of your opponents and scoring victory points in that way, but the main central mechanism of drafting your cards on the central array of cards is what adds for a lot of tension in First Class. Just like in Ginkopolis, it adds tension with not only what you're trying to do, but with how your opponents are manipulating the main central board that will then dictate what you can do with your own actions. So both games have that tense feeling like, oh, I hope they don't do this, or I hope they do this in the main board here, because then I can then take that action or use that action optimally to help out what my main strategy is in front of me. And both games give that similar feel. So I do really enjoy both games. First Class barely missed the list this year, so this time it is Ginkopolis, but both games are definitely worth a try and have a lot of similarities. My number 28 was number 36 last year, so hopping up a few spots here. Fantastic, nice, light, horror-themed cooperative board game that, for how light it is and how far into my board gaming career I am, I'm surprised how much I like it, but it just goes over so well every time we play the game, and it never fails. So this game is Horrified. Horrified hits the table every time around Halloween season, but really we can put it on the table at any time of year and have a blast playing it. Like I said, it's a very simplified cooperative game, but also you can ramp it up for more difficult adventures if you're playing with more experienced gamers. Pretty much what you're doing is you are essentially taking action points with your main character around the board to do different things around the main board, just like in Pandemic, for example. In Horrified, you are trying to collect different color items that have different stats on them for either how strong the item is or how weak the item is, and using those items in various ways to defeat the monsters on the board. In Horrified, there are two versions. There's the American Monsters or the classic Horrified. I've played the American Monsters version once. I've played Horrified, the original version, many times, where it's got the universal monsters like Dracula and Creature from the Black Lagoon and Frankenstein's monster and Bride of Frankenstein and all like the classic, more of the classic monsters. But what's really cool is that each monster has an asymmetric win condition that's very unique to each monster. So it creates for a lot of variability every time you play the game. And also you can ramp up the difficulty, because not only are certain monsters more difficult to beat than other monsters, but you can also play against only one monster or two monsters or three, or very hard is playing against maybe four monsters, and you can choose that before the game starts to ramp up your difficulty or tone it back if you've been losing a few times. So with that, I really enjoy the ramping up difficulty or toning it back depending on your play group, and just provides for that variety and extended gameplay and longevity for this game. So I can see Horrified hitting the table for many years to come. My alternative game in this slot is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. Like in Horrified, Mansions of Madness has kind of more of that horror theme. You are working cooperatively together to fulfill these different missions. It's a lot more story-driven, which I tend not to really like in games. I'm not a very thematic or story-driven type of gamer. I really like mechanisms to drive the core enjoyment in the game. And Mansions of Madness, if you are looking for more of that story element, It's got a companion app that really adds to that story as well, with great voiceover actors and music, and it really sets the scene with your exploration throughout the mansion and what you're trying to do as a group to accomplish common goals together. It really adds that environmental horror feel as you are trekking through that mansion that Horrified doesn't give you. But if you're looking for more of that experience, then I would suggest Mansions of Madness. But if you're looking for more of a game where I feel like Horrified's got a little bit more legs to it and a little bit more variability, and if you have younger gamers in your game group or a younger family, or a game that you could also bring to the table with adults, then I think Horrified is very well scalable in that way, and it plays in a lot shorter period of time than Mansions of Madness. So that's why Horrified made it in this position on the list this time. All right, my number 27 was number 23 last year, so this game has been holding steady and has been a strong position holder in my list for many, many, many years. Ever since I got the game, I've just loved the game to pieces, and this game is Blood Rage. Blood Rage, classic dudes on a map style game, but it's got card drafting that really drives the main mechanisms in the game. I love card drafting. I love the different area control and the dudes on a map, bringing big monsters and warriors to the table and vying for control over these different areas. All in the while, it's just got that simple card drafting at the beginning of each round. It's a 3-round game, so it goes fairly quick. You're always involved in what you're doing and what others are doing, and you care about everyone's turns. Because they can really mess you over and you can mess them over, and there's a lot of back and forth and interaction in that. As the rounds move on, the cards scale up, so the cards get better that you're drafting, and essentially every card is a card that you wouldn't mind having in your hand. So it provides for very tough drafting decisions. Some hate drafting, so your neighbor doesn't get one of the cards that you might not want them to get. So there is a little bit of that in it, but just a lot of fun getting victory points in various ways. There are cards you can draft to where you get victory points if your characters are dying on the map. So if you feel like you're in a position where there's just going to be a big bloodbath and you're going to come out as the underdog in that, you can grab some cards where you're actually gaining victory points for that having been done to you. So that is really unique and cool also. And my alternative pick to this game is a game by the same designer. It's just newer and it's in the same trilogy, so it's kind of a cheat, but I'm using it because it's not on my list technically, and it is similar enough to really put in this spot. And this game is Ankh. Like I said, by Eric Lang, same designer, publisher, Cool Mini or Not, same publisher. But it's still got that similar feel. It doesn't have the card drafting mechanism driving the whole game like in Blood Rage, and I think that's why Blood Rage made it on the list over Ankh. But it does have a cool action selection system with some worker placement, not quite worker placement, but placing your action tokens on a track, and depending on where those are placed on the track, that'll dictate what you can do on your turn. So there is a lot of tension with placing on those tracks to get the actions that you need, but all in the while essentially kind of similar to Blood Rage, where you've got a lot of area control on the map and you're building monuments and vying for control over these monuments to get points in that way. So I really do enjoy both games a lot, but still to this day, Blood Rage just barely beats it out for me. But I will play Ankh anytime that it's suggested or put on the table, and one that I actually haven't played for a little while and would love to get it to the table here soon. So on the list this time is Blood Rage. All right, and my number 26 board game of all time was number 31 last year. So another board game that is holding steady and strong on my list, and this is Merv, The Heart of the Silk Road. I still think I haven't gotten this one tabled with the gaming group and the main guys here. I think the majority of the time, if not all the time, I've only played this 2-player with my wife, but my wife and I really enjoy this game a lot. I think it's because it plays so quickly at 2-player. The mechanisms really move along at a good clip once you get going. The flow of the game is very nice and smooth, and as the ball gets rolling, the momentum just carries it through and plays in a very quick time period, but also providing a lot of strategic punch and both of those combined are two things that I really love in a game. In Merv, you're sending your person around the board, and you have to stop at one of the action spots on one of the sides of the square board. You can decide how far your person goes on that track on that side of the board, but as soon as you get to one of the corners of the map, you then have to stop for that round and wait for your opponents to get to where you're at before you can begin the next side of the board. The way this works is that you've got these actions that are in rows and columns in the middle of this board, and depending on where you stop, you can do different actions with those. You can place out your houses to claim those tiles, so then they're triggered in the future. If you land on a row or column that intersects with one of your houses in the future, you can trigger that for like more resources or more bonuses. And essentially you're trying to build out the best strategic way to place your houses in the middle of this board to then create these combo effects in the future. And things you can do with comboing in the central board of actions is basically just going up on a bunch of different tracks around the board as well. And whoever can go up those tracks better wins. And I'm typically not a huge fan of just going up tracks to combo with different things and just see what you get out of it. And whoever goes up the tracks the best wins the game. Kind of like in Tapestry, for example, I wasn't really a huge fan of that. And other games where it's just mainly you're going up tracks to win the game is typically what I don't enjoy in a game, but for whatever reason in Merv it just really works because I feel like you're doing so much with that central board and the mechanisms with that and trying to combo better than your opponents with that little mini game in the middle of the board to then tell you what you can do with the main tracks around the board. So I think that interaction between the two parts of the board is what I really enjoyed about it, and I really found that to be a lot of fun. So my alternative game for this spot is Space Base, and yet again, completely different than the main game. It's not really anything like Merv at all, other than the fact that you are trying to build out your tableau or your actions in front of you to then be triggered on future turns. And it can be triggered by other players or triggered by you, and with that is where a lot of the similarities lie between Space Base and Merv. So I think if you like that combo building in Space Base, but you're looking for a more complex version of it, I would give Merv a try because Merv, Heart of the Silk Road, is just a little bit more crunchy and strategic and yes, a completely different game, but it gives you a similar combo feel as in Space Base. And where other players can trigger your combo that you've set up for yourself for the future. So if you like that feeling in a board game that you get from those combos and what you can do with those combos to try to get more points than your opponents, then I think you'll really appreciate that in Merv as well. So my pick here is Merv. All right, my number 25 game is In the Hall of the Mountain King. It was number 18 last year, and I think it's just dropping because it hasn't hit the table in quite a while, but In the Hall of the Mountain King is fantastic. I really, really enjoy what is all going on. If you've heard anything about In the Hall of the Mountain King, the main mechanism that drives the whole system of the game is what people rant and rave about. It is a cascading card system. So you are building out a pyramid of cards in front of you, and anytime you add another card to that pyramid, it triggers the cards higher up the chain of the cards you had played previously. So another combo feel of a game where you're trying to get these cascading resources, and every time you play another card on top of that, you're just getting more and more resources to do better and better things with. And the main central board, you are trying to dig out these different caverns and rooms to play statues to try to gain victory points in that way. And also there are some other parts of the board where if you dig them out, you get bonuses for that. So it's really cool because you've got these polyomino shaped tunnels that you are digging through the side of the mountain and creating these rooms. And it's got a really cool board presence with that, but also how that main board polyomino placing of the tiles works with your cascading resources elements in front of you is really unique and really cool, and I love how both of them interact with one another. Another game where the main board interacts with the combos you are creating for yourself in front of you. So I think that's kind of a common trend here with this year's list that I've really enjoyed with some of these newer games that have come out in the last few years. So that is In the Hall of the Mountain King. And my alternative pick for this spot on the list is Messina 1347. Another game with what you are doing on the main board really interacts with what you're doing on your own personal player board. A lot of combos in this game. Also, you are shifting your advisors around your main board to trigger these combos and trying to get your spots upgraded on your player board so that the next time you take a similar action, you are getting a bigger and bigger benefit and bonus for that. And on the main board, there's a lot of player interaction and blocking people from different spots, and you're just really trying to combo with what you're doing and interacting with on the main board with your opponents, and also paying attention to your own personal board with what direction you're going to take, almost like in a tech tree sort of way, to try to make the best combos for yourself to get the most victory points by the end. So I think those two aspects of these games, both in Messina and in the Hall of the Mountain King, are what play into each other so nicely, and I think that's what really compels me to want to play both of these titles more. But in this spot this time, in the Hall of the Mountain King is what wins. Okay, my number 24 game was number 42 last year, has really jumped really high up there, and is one of my all-time favorite party games ever. And this game is When I Dream. And I think I'm the biggest proponent for this game out of anybody I know. And I don't hear anyone talking about this game other than myself online on any other channels. I don't know if it's just me, if I'm just the weirdo that likes the game and nobody else enjoys it. I don't know how well it's sold or anything like that, but When I Dream is just so fantastic. It's awesome. Everybody has their own roll card at the beginning of every round, or I guess the beginning of the whole round of the game. You can play multiple rounds. It's a very quick party game, but you're either a fairy or the boogeyman or a sandman, somewhere in between. And depending on who you are, what role you have, you are trying to either give good clues or bad clues to the main person guessing what the clue should be. The unique thing about this game is that one person starts off blindfolded, and there is a central deck of cards in the center of the table, and each of the cards has a clue on it with a picture and the word of the clue. And if you're a fairy, you're trying to get the blindfolded person to guess the clue correctly. If you're a boogeyman, you're trying to give clues that are just far enough off from the other good clues. They're just bad enough to get them to guess it incorrectly, because if the blindfolded person guesses the clue incorrectly, then you get points for that. And then the Sandman, by the end of the round, is trying to get the most balance out of both of those. So you're trying to get them to guess just as many of the clues correctly as the cards that they guessed incorrectly. So there's a lot of cool dynamics with that. Every player takes one turn being the blindfolded person, and at the end of passing the blindfold around the table, you count up your points, and whoever has the most points wins. But really, it's one of those games where the points don't really even matter. I just have fun trying to, even when I'm the blindfolded person, have fun trying to guess the clues, and just by hearing, or guess what the main card is just by hearing the clues that people are giving me, and trying to pick out the bad clues from the good clues, and who's the good people and the bad people. And then also, depending on your role, all the roles are fun trying to actually give those clues to the blindfolded person. So everything with this game, I just really enjoy it and love it every time. And my alternative pick for this spot is a game that I just played recently, just purchased it, played it, got it tabled recently, and tabled it many, many times. And that's So Clover. That's So Clover, another party game where it's got some cool things going on with it, that you're trying to give basically one main guesser clues at what your main objective is. So everybody is given a 4-leaf clover. You randomly seed the clover with 4 different cards, and depending on the orientation of the cards, because each card has 4 different words on it, that'll then pair that leaf with the leaf next to it, giving you 2 words, and you have to give the guesser a 1-word clue that ties both of those 2 words into each other. After writing your clues on all of the leaves, you take the cards off, shuffle them all up, and throw in a couple additional cards as cards to throw them off. Shuffle them all together, lay them out face up, and then you show them your clover board, and they have to guess which cards go where in which exact orientations. So it's a very difficult game and almost more of just a puzzle or kind of a mental puzzle that you're playing with you and your friends. And another game where I don't really play for score, I just play for fun, and it provides a unique puzzle every time. It's almost kind of like crosswords or just playing some other sort of puzzle with you and your friends that you're trying to solve together. So a fun, cooperative, party-style game. I still like When I Dream better, I think, for now, but both games are fantastic. Okay, and my number 23 game is one of my favorite cooperative games of all time, and this game is Paleo. Paleo, I love it so much that I brought it to one of our local conventions this year in Minnesota called Con of the North, and I taught it to a bunch of people all weekend long, and everybody just had a blast playing it. Paleo is a very simple cooperative game for its mechanisms and for the gameplay, but it provides a lot of strategic depth. And another thing with Paleo 2 that I enjoy, like in other cooperative board games, is that the scalability with how difficult you want it to be, there's just a ton of it in the box, especially even in the base box, there's a ton of it because the game comes with decks of cards that are modules, different modules that you can shuffle together to tone back or scale up the difficulty depending on what kind of a challenge you're looking for. The main thing in Paleo is that you have a deck of cards that have these different locations shown on the backs of the cards. So you've got like forests and rivers and mountains and your home base camp, and you shuffle them all together and deal them all out evenly to all the players, or as evenly as possible. And based on the top 3 cards of your starting deck, those will have 3 locations you get to choose from that you want to visit without knowing what's on the other side. So it takes place in, obviously, the Paleo-American era. A lot of life-threatening things around every corner, so you don't necessarily know what you're going to get yourself into when you're exploring these different spots. On the main board, it gives you some clues at what you might find depending on the location you're visiting, but you don't know what's going to turn up around every corner, around every leaf, or every rock that you pull over. It could be a rock slide, or it could just be, a bed of rocks that you get to gather some rocks for your base camp. Something simple or something difficult. You could trudge through the woods and find some berries to bring back to base camp to provide food for everybody, or that forest you visited could have a wolf in it, and you might have to try to fight off the wolf, and if you can't, your main base camp people will take damage. And if enough of them take damage, you lose the game. So it's just fully cooperative. Some cards actually allow you to use it as a helping hands symbol, where you can help out one of your partners defeat their location just by discarding your card. So you don't necessarily get a good benefit out of it, other than the fact you get to use your abilities on your characters to help them defeat or become successful in what they're doing, which is just as great too. But yeah, a cool cooperative dynamic that isn't very difficult to learn or play, but one that you can really scale up and scale down the difficulty depending on the group of players you're playing with. So my alternative pick for this game is Robinson Crusoe, another very difficult worker placement style cooperative game, and one that doesn't admittedly hit the table very often because it is the exact opposite in rules complexity as Paleo. Whereas Paleo, you can just pull out and have fun learning the game right away, and everybody is into it in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes. Robinson Crusoe, I feel like I have to relearn the game every time I pull it out. I just can't remember any of it for the life of me. And I've heard that from a lot of other reviewers online and other people that I've played the game with, that every time it's like a 45 minute reteach or relearn of the game. And that really hurts. That really hurts it when you're bringing it to the table. But when we do finally relearn it and get through a scenario, it is a lot of fun. Like I said, it's worker placement. You are working together to do these different actions and take down these threat cards, or trying to build out your base camp or fortify it with some walls so that the threats can't get in, or building a roof to your different camps so that the elements and the weather can't get to your crew and do some damage to your group that way, and just trying to survive the island. It's got different scenarios that you can play through, which adds some variability to the game, which is a lot of fun. But I think the main thing I really appreciate in Robinson Crusoe that not a lot of other games do is that once you encounter a card, You then shuffle it back into the deck, and depending on how you dealt with that card earlier, might either help or hurt you further down the line. So, if you see a snake early on and you don't kill the snake, it gets shuffled back into the deck, and the next time it resurfaces, now the snake might bite you because you didn't take care of it the first time. So when it came back the second time, it was able to, sneak up on you and do some harm. Just little examples like that. There's just a huge thick deck of event cards that all interact in the same way that, you can choose not to deal with this danger now, and not waste your resources on it now. But if you choose to do that, it will resurface later and could do some, even more damage later on down the road. So I really like that design element in Robinson Crusoe. And honestly, that's one of the main driving factors for me keeping the game in my collection. But for this time, my pick is Paleo. All right, in my number 22 game, I don't own yet, but I did back the second Kickstarter and should be receiving it here in the mail any day now. And I am very, very excited to table this one again. I've only played it with a buddy's copy and just excited to get my own copy and get my hands on it. This game is The Great Wall. In The Great Wall, it is another worker placement game, but it's a worker placement tower defense style game that's got a semi-cooperative feel to it, but one that does it really well. Usually games that are semi-cooperative just don't really work and haven't ever really worked, but this is the first game I found where it really does work, and it's a lot of fun. You're all trying to fight off the hordes of beings from coming into your camp and over the Great Wall. So you're all collectively building up the wall and running up there and using your archers to shoot down on them, and you collectively want to keep them away from coming at you. But also you're trying to do that better than everybody else because whoever's doing it better and doing it the most gets more points for that. And whoever's the most points at the end of the game wins. There are some generals in the game that add some asymmetry to your faction, which is really cool and really unique. So you're trying to exploit that and do the best you can with your special powers. And there's a really cool, unique dynamic to the worker placement spots in this game also, where if you're not balancing what you're doing with those spots very well and other players are really maximizing on certain locations better than you have been for the last couple turns, they can actually give you shame tokens, and shame tokens are negative victory points at the end of the game. So you really have to balance what you're doing with not only the worker placement spots, but also fending off the hordes of people coming in on the Great Wall. So it's got some cool push and pull dynamic to it, watching what other players are doing, trying to do better than other players at defending the wall, and just a lot of cool things going on with it. This is another heavier game. It's one of the heaviest worker placement games I've ever played. And also, like I said, semi-cooperative in nature. Typically hasn't really worked with any other board games previously, but for whatever reason in The Great Wall, it just really works and everything sings so nicely. My alternative pick for this spot is After the Empire. After the Empire is another tower defense style game, but in this game you are building up your own walls around your own structure, your own castle, and at the end of the round, you have hordes of people invading your own castle. So in After the Empire, it's more about how well you're building up your own structure, your own fortification, your own troops to defend your walls, and then having hordes of people come at your own structure, and whoever can fend them off better than the other players will win the game and get more points than the other players for that reason. So I really do like this game as well. The components are great. The overall table presence is fantastic. Everything looks great. What you're doing is really cool. Worker placement still, and just really watching what other players are doing and trying to get to certain spots on the board before they do to make your structure just a little bit better than theirs before the hordes of people break into your town center and really start causing some damage. So it's got some similarities in that way. This game feels a little bit more straight competitive than semi-competitive or semi-cooperative or which way you want to put it, whereas The Great Wall has more of that semi-competitive, semi-cooperative feel to it. And for whatever reason, The Great Wall still holds this spot more so for me than After the Empire, but we'll see. Only time will tell. All right, my number 21 game was number 21 on the list last year as well. So really, this is the definition of holding strong and steady, and this game is Queen Domino. Queen Domino, John from Talking Cardboard might be disappointed in me because he might think it should be higher than this, but number 21, still fantastic, still way up there on the list, and for good reason. Queen Domino is just your classic domino style game, but with a few twists that really elevate it above and beyond, the traditional dominoes. In Queen Domino, it has a really cool drafting system where, depending on the value of the tile you're drafting, because some tiles are better than other tiles, that'll tell you what turn order you can draft the next tile in the next turn. So if you take a weaker tile this time, it'll set you up for maybe maybe a first or second pick at the new batch of tiles for the next round. But if you take the best tile, well, then you're going to be the last to choose the next tile next round. So balancing that drafting of tiles is really cool. And also the ease of play and the ease of teach in this game is really something to behold. It's very simple to teach, but provides a lot of strategy. And again, I'm just coming back to that. Easy to learn, easy to play, easy to teach, but still providing really complex, in-depth strategy are just two things that designers should really, really try to do and take more a hold of, because I just feel like that's what a lot of people really appreciate and gels with a lot of people. In Queen Domino, the main way you're scoring points is that you're placing tiles in front of you and you're building out areas of different colors. Depending on how big the area is of a particular color, you add up how many king's crowns are in that area and multiply it by the size of that area. So if you have an area that is maybe 4 square tiles worth of dominoes and it's got 2 crowns on it, you take the 4 times the 2 for 8 points. But also in Queen Domino, it adds another element, for example, over King Domino, which is the simpler version. You have red zones on your player board that you can place those tiles on to give you unique special abilities and end game victory point scoring and things like that just take it up a notch for me. And that's why Queen Domino beats out King Domino. For me, it's just a little bit more gamery feeling, but still is a simple enough game to teach within 5 minutes. So Queen Domino is just awesome for those reasons. And my alternative pick for this spot on the list is Isle of Skye. Isle of Skye, I'm a little disappointed that it didn't make my top 50 because it is a great game and is a fantastic tile placement game. One that I feel is even a little bit more complex than Queen Domino, and I think that's why Queen Domino wins over Isle of Skye, because you can pull it out and put it on the table in front of more varying groups of people in different age groups and things like that. It just sees the table more often for that reason. But in Isle of Skye, it's cool because every player has their own player screen that are hiding how much money they have behind their player screens. So nobody knows how much money they have. And in Isle of Skye, money is very valuable because you are bidding secretively for tiles that are in front of your player screen. So in secret, everybody bids on how much value they want to put on their tiles. So then when you reveal and pull your player screen, that you put a cost and a value to each one of the tiles that are in front of you. Everybody takes turns purchasing tiles around the table. You can't purchase any of the tiles that are in front of you. You can only purchase tiles that are in front of other players. So if somebody has a really good tile that might work for your kingdom, really well, they might put a high price tag on it so that you have to give them a lot of money just to gain that tile to your kingdom. Whereas you still don't want to put too high of a price on many of your tiles, because any of the tiles that are left over in front of you after everybody has gotten their opportunities to buy tiles from one another, you are left paying the amount of value you put on your own tiles for yourself. And you have to pay that money to the bank and then keep those tiles. So it also plays into, if there's a tile in front of you that really works for your kingdom and you don't want anyone else to get it, yeah, sure, put a ton of money on it and nobody will want to buy it from you, or nobody will even be able to afford it from you. But also then you have to play that risk with yourself, that risk reward, that you might be losing all that money to the bank to then keep the tile for yourself because nobody else wanted to pay that for it. So I like that in Isle of Skye. I think Queen Domino, like I said, just barely beats it out because of the simplicity of it and the ease to teach. Isle of Skye is a little bit more complicated to teach, so it doesn't see the table as often. But both games are tile placement and really unique and fun in their own way. So I would give either one a try. And if you don't like one, you may like the other. So this one is a little bit more of a unique scenario where it works in that way. But still, both are tile placement, so I had to kind of combine them and put them together here as an alternative pick. But, you know, like I said, this time on the list, Queen Domino is the game that wins. All right, everybody, that does it for today's list. My games 30 up to 21, really getting high up there on the list. Like I said in previous segments, or if you haven't watched them yet, go back and watch those. But like I had previously said, I will be getting other members of the Talking Cardboard crew involved in other segments of the videos as we get closer to number 1. So I'm gonna have some people maybe join me for games 20 up to number 1 and some of their picks, or maybe, you know, their top 10 favorite games of all time, and really get the whole crew involved and together in those final videos to give you some more variable picks. So it's not just me giving you my opinion in every video. So, you know, that'll give some cool insight on what they all enjoy to play and see what kind of overlap we have with our game group and what games don't overlap. And I know I really like that, you know, in a lot of the videos that I watch. Again, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, but I did steal this alternative game pick idea from Joel Eddy from Drive-Thru Games, Drive-Thru Review. I've been watching his videos for years, really appreciate the idea that he has thrown out there, and I have stolen the idea, and I will continue to use the idea because I find it to be very helpful for when I watch videos like that. So I wanted to provide that for our viewers as well. So leave in the comments below with what your favorite games are of all time. I would love to hear your picks. Maybe there's some games that I haven't tried before that I would love to seek out and try for myself. And, you know, as always, like the video, subscribe if you appreciate what you're doing with the channel. We are getting our Patreon going as well, so if you'd like to contribute to that, that'll be live here soon. So until next time, you all have fun gaming.